Hello and welcome to Otterwood Cottage, our beautiful small holding in the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside. I'm Emma and we're delighted to have you along with us. Now that intro was a bit misleading because I'm not actually in our beautiful small holding in the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside. As you can probably tell, I'm in my car and I'm away from home at the moment. So a bit of a different video today, but I thought I would just share with you a little thing I've been playing with because I've been away from home, because I've not been around the small holding much this week. I have been instead using time that I have had to do a little bit of planning and to think about our kitchen garden. So our kitchen garden is a little bit different from the rest of our growing area. It's closer to the house for obvious reasons, and that is the one area where we are going to use some raised beds. And we happened to see just recently that Debenhams, of all places, had a really good offer on some raised beds of the style we were looking for. So we jumped on that offer and bought 8 raised beds ready to go into the kitchen garden, which hopefully this weekend, if the storm doesn't prevent us from doing it, we are going to fill ready for planting in the spring. And because I've been playing around with AI a little bit for work purposes, I've been using ChatGPT just on the periphery of learning how it works. I thought whilst I was away I would have a look and see if ChatGPT can help us with planning what we're going to put in those beds. So I'm neither an expert in AI, ChatGPT, nor an expert in garden design, but that's kind of the point. Is I'm really interested to share the process I went through with you and to get your take on, do you think that AI can help us plan garden beds? So I'm going to show you the conversation I had with ChatGPT to try and plan the beds. I'll show you what ChatGPT came up with, and you can tell me, do we think that this is a useful tool, or do we think that it's a waste of time and completely unhelpful for garden designers? I'll let you decide. So this was where I started, which is with a prompt. And one of the things I have been learning about for work purposes is the importance of getting your initial prompt right. So one of the things that has been given as a piece of advice is to tell ChatGPT at the start what their expertise is, so they are answering your questions from the point of view of that expertise. So you can see from the prompts I gave them that I told them they were an expertise in garden design with speciality in kitchen gardens, and then went on to tell them a bit more precisely what I wanted. And because I asked it to ask me questions one at a time, it then came back with a really fairly comfortable feeling kind of conversation that we wrote between each other, where ChatGPT was asking me what my preferences were, and I was responding with genuine responses, as if this was a person asking me the questions, as if this was a professional garden designer. So initially ChatGPT was asking me about what my preferences were, and then about the themes. So you can slow this recording down and see what the conversation was. I don't want to read it all out to you. If you're interested in the detail, you can absolutely kind of pause and read what we've said to one another. It's quite disconcerting in many ways, because it does feel like you're having a conversation with a person. It feels very human, which of course is the advantage of AI, large language models of this type, the ChatGPT. So it's been, this is the kind of thing I've been playing with for work purposes, but this is the first time I've used it for our small holding purposes. So just showing you, it's kind of going through now the questions, and at this point it felt like we were starting to get to something a bit more specific, which we did. And in just a moment it's going to show you the plan that it came up with. And the plan it came up with was given to me in the form of a spreadsheet. So it gave me each of the 8 beds, the theme for each of the 8 beds, and then suggested planting in each of those 8 beds. And then the final kind of column was the reasons that it felt that they were a good combination of plants. So one of the last things it asked me, you'll see in a moment, was is there anything else I need to know? And the last bit of information I gave it was the importance of there being animals on the property, and so there needed to be nothing that was toxic to animals. So there you can see, just coming up now is the spreadsheet that it gave me, and I'm going to open that up so you can see what the suggestions are. So 8 beds, each with a different theme, each with a suggested set of planting, and the companion planting notes, so the reasons that AI is suggesting that we plant those different types of things together. I then wanted some advice. I wanted to see if I could push it further, so I asked for some advice on exactly how to plant within those beds. So thank you for giving me those. Effectively, what I asked for was, thank you for giving me those combinations of plants, but how do I place them in the bed to make sure that they are placed in the best possible way? And you can see initially it gave me an example for one bed, which was the Mediterranean themed one, and then I said, great, can I have the layout for all of the beds? So then it went through each of the 8 beds. So we've got the Mediterranean one here with suggestion for what goes on the corners, what goes in the middle, the edges, and what you trail over the edge, for example. Then the second theme that it had suggested was French cuisine. The third was a Chinese-inspired theme. And then the fourth one, just coming up now, were the bed for herbal teas. Bed number 5 was a pollinator haven in bold colours. So one of the questions it had asked me earlier on was whether I wanted bold or pastel, and I said I like both. So you can see that it's created 2 pollinator beds, one bold, one pastel tones. And then it also asked me whether I wanted basics or adventurous spices, and again I said both, so it's given me quite a lot of basics and then one kind of adventurous bed. And then the final bed was for the edible flowers and ornamentals. All right, so that was phase 1, which was a written conversation between myself and the AI tool, and you could see that it did exactly what I asked it to do, which was to act in the position of an expert, asked me a series of questions, which I then answered, and then it came up with that planting plan. On the whole, I was pretty impressed. I think it came up with questions that were useful for me to reflect on and think about. The planting plan it came up with included everything I'd asked it to include. There were some additional kind of surprise things in there, interesting, slightly more exotic varieties, which I had asked for. And they are all things that I would have planted or looked into planting. So from the point of view of being a useful exercise to think about what you want in your planting space, I think it was a success. The next thing I asked it to do was to try and help me with the visual layout. So I had an idea in my mind as to how I wanted to lay out the 8 beds, and I started to try and work with the system to help me see what that would look like in a visual format. That was much less successful, partly because it's really quite difficult to explain a visual in words, and so to start with, it felt that I was just not explaining things well enough. But actually, even when I showed them, I'll show you now a really rough sketch of what I had in mind, which I was able to give to the AI tool as a visual example of what I wanted. And even then, the suggestions it was coming back with clearly weren't matching what I was suggesting. So I think from a visual layout point of view, either I'm not skilled enough to prompt the AI tool well enough, or the AI tool, or certainly ChatGPT in its kind of free format, which is what I was using, doesn't have the capability at the moment to translate words or sketches into something that gives that visual representation that you want. So definitely less successful from that point of view. And then the third thing that I asked it to do, which I felt was probably more mixed. So I wanted a kind of 3D visual stylized version of what the beds might look like for inspiration. And I'll show you what it came up with. I just gave it back the design that it had given me for each of the beds and asked for a 3D stylized version. So here's what it gave me for bed 1, bed 2, bed 3, bed 4, bed 5, bed 6, bed 7, and bed 8. So I don't know what you think. I thought they were kind of nice visuals. They were nice things to look at. I'm not sure that the visuals exactly matched the planting plans in terms of the plants they're showing in that visual being exactly matched. There were some that were quite obviously the things that they'd suggested in the planting plan. Every bed, or a lot of the beds, seemed to have some kind of random cabbage in there that I'm not really sure where that's come from. And there were some other kind of inaccuracies in what was on there. So it certainly wasn't perfect, but as a bit of fun and something to kind of give you some visual idea of what the bed might look like and decide whether you want to go ahead with it, I thought it was interesting. It got the dimensions of the bed very wrong. It was kind of giving me square beds in most circumstances, even though it knew from earlier in the conversation that it was a rectangular oval bed that we were actually planting into. So it wasn't perfect from that point of view. But overall, as an exercise, I found it really useful, predominantly from the point of view of the questions that it asked me in that role as an expert garden designer. Really made me think about what I wanted in a much more structured way than I probably would have done if I'd just kind of sat down and thought about this on my own. So from the point of view of really helping you think through what it is you want and how you want to lay things out, I definitely think that was a useful exercise. I need to learn more, and perhaps it needs more capability to be more useful as a kind of visual tool, but certainly as a back and forth discussion around what you might want to include in a garden, I did find it a useful process. Whether the suggestions that have come out of it are really positive ones, of course, we won't know for at least a year until we've been through the planting cycle, the growing cycle. I think I am going to use roughly the suggestions that it gives, just because I think it's really interesting to see whether that was a worthwhile exercise in the long run. And ultimately, it's no different really to what I would have done otherwise, which is buy some seeds that I liked the look of and plant them relatively randomly with a little bit of research into what grew tallest. So I think it can't hurt. I'm not going to be any worse off for following the plan. And we can see together as the year goes on whether it's worked or not. What I'd really like, though, is if any of you out there are either much more skilled at AI than me or are garden designers and know a lot about planting combinations, if you're able to comment and have thoughts on whether this was a good exercise, a useful set of guidance that came out of the tool, or whether you think actually it's made some major mistakes that I haven't spotted, let me know in the comments and we can learn together as to whether this is a useful way forward for garden design or not. So that's the end of this video. Very different in style to usual. I hope you enjoyed it. Business as usual will resume this weekend, where I'm hoping we'll be able to start showing you the actual physical layout of those new beds that we've bought, and some other things that are happening on the small holding this weekend, subject of course to the storm not stopping play. So we will catch up with you at the weekend, but until then, have a fantastic time and I'll see you very soon. Bye.